to this week's programming tips. So once again, we're going to look at a couple of debugging issues, but first we're going to look at the big picture of event-driven code. When I first started to use event-driven code, it just seemed weird. Okay, and why is that? Okay, the problem is that the control flow, i.e. the sequence of instructions that are executed, just really isn't explicit in your code. After all, the event handlers are being called by something else, okay, not your code. So there's a couple potential problems that arise from this. So let's explore that. So as an example for event handling code, we're going to use this. And let's see what it does. Well, we have a little red circle and a few buttons. So I can increase this value here and then change the circle. Okay, when I change the circle, it takes this new value as the new radius. Then I can decrease that and change the circle again. Okay. So right away we can see one problem with this code, that when I change the circle radius, this message of what the radius size is isn't changing. Okay. So that's going to be easy enough to fix, but what do we need to do here? Okay, so we can come in here, and so we have a handler to change the circle size. And what we need to do is set the text for that label. Okay, but, well, in fact, we don't even have a name for that label. So let's give it a name first. Radius label. And then up here, I can say radius label set text to be radius plus the string of what is the new radius value. Okay. Let's run that just to double check. Okay. Can increase that, change the circle size, and the message changes. Okay, so we fixed that problem. But what is the underlying issue? Okay, the issue is basically, since this code is in an event handler, it's very easy to just kind of forget it when you're testing and debugging, because maybe you had tested and debugged and never actually used the chain circle. You only increased and decreased, and you said, well, that works, and you forgot to test some other features. Let's continue to test our little program here. Let's see what happens if I decrease my value. Ooh, it goes negative eventually. And then if I change my circle size, uh-oh, I have an error. Okay. So here's a problem that, we don't want our radius to ever go negative. Okay, and we can fix that. Let's see, up here, we have a button for decrementing the size. And well, all we want to do is we only want to decrement if in fact it's currently positive. Okay. So if size is greater than 0, then we'll decrement the size and change the label here. Okay, we only need to change it if we're changing the size. Okay. Now let's see if that actually fixes the problem. Okay. So I can decrease, I can even change the circle size to a little one here. But no matter how many times I press the decrease button, I can't get a negative radius, which is what I want. Okay. But once again, what is the underlying problem? Here, I mean, if you're just increasing and decreasing this value, it makes perfect sense to have that value go negative. I mean, after all, you can decrease a 0 to -1, for example. But it doesn't make sense when you're also considering the other feature of drawing a circle of that size. The problem is we often tend to forget the interaction between the event handlers. Okay, so you have to consider all the possible cases of how you you might increase and then change the circle, and decrease and change the circle. You have to consider all the possible interactions and interleavings of different actions. Now we're going to consider two very specific debugging issues. Here we have a version of the code that you see every time you go to CodeSculptor. This is the code that comes up, or at least a version of it. Okay. When we run this version, however, this is what we get. In particular, you see a blank canvas, and clicking on this button does nothing. Okay. Anytime you see a blank canvas like this, very straightforward issue here. Notice we forgot to actually start the frame. Okay, so we can say frame.start. And now the program actually works. And for this example here, we have a couple timers. This timer is just going to print out 1, the other timer prints out 2 periodically, so we ought to see a bunch of 1s and 2s. When we run it, nothing happens. Well, why? It's the same problem as the previous one. Basically, we haven't started things. We need to start the 2 timers. And of course, to start a timer, you need a name for it. So let's give names. And then start the timers. And let's see if it works now. Indeed it does. It prints out a bunch of 1s and 2s. Okay. The important thing is when you have timers, basically if you don't see anything happening, check if you remembered to start the timers.